Hello, everyone. My name is James Burkhardt, and this is the Political Divide. Well, I still haven't been able to get a script I love for the other subject I'm covering. So we once again have a different topic, not the topic I wanted to start off with. And this topic today is going to be the recent ruling on the Cakeshop. Um, I'm sure all of you know about this. Is the Cakeshop denied making a wedding cake to a homosexual couple and created somewhat of a firestorm of just both sides kind of flailing. Religious people on one side screaming religious liberty, uh, liberal folks, I don't want to say liberal folk, uh, supporters of the LGBTQ community saying uh, civil rights. On the other hand, so there's been a lot of back and forth. And I hope you don't think I'm making light of this. I'm just trying to get through that initial bit here. Uh, it's a very emotionally charged topic, and as someone who has long identified as bisexual and recently started identifying as pansexual, more as a need for more to be inclusive than anything else, recognizing that bisexual was exclusive, was being considered exclusive of transgender and non-binary individuals. So I chose to I've identified that way. And I don't make a secret of it, but I'm not too. I'm also not too. What's the word? Like loud and proud. Um, so it's been a. But in there, fitting in that spectrum, I do support the LGBTQ community, and so for a long time I was on the civil rights bandwagon. With the recent Supreme Court ruling, I've always had problems with the conflict inherent in this case. And some people say there's no conflict. Well, let me kind of try to talk about the conflict because it's actually there is conflict in this case. And but with this case, I was like, with the recent Supreme Court ruling, I wanted to talk about it and then try to talk about um, what I think the eventual outcome should be. So first, a little background. It's probably obvious to most people, but so the First Amendment gives us a right, two rights within the First Amendment that are intertwined and inescapable. The right of free expression and the right of religious freedom, specifically a freedom from government. But in both these cases, they are the rights, the right to not have the government interfere in our rights in these cases. This is a very important kind of distinction that's being made here. Mainly because and those I know that there are other. These are the two that are important to this case. Um, Freedom of expression, and that includes artistic expression, and a freedom of religion, and both of those need to be free, need to be unabridged by the government, in so much as they can be. Additionally, on the other side, the 14th Amendment provides the Equal Protection Clause does apply to sexual orientation. I'm not sure if it's been expressly stated. I think it was expressly stated in the gay marriage case that came up, the one that made gay marriage legal across the country. Um, I think it was finally expressly stated. I can't remember that ruling very well. Um, but in the end, it's pretty easy. It's an argument that I've made about why recognizing transgender and preferred gender pronouns, which is that they're all based on sexual discrimination explicitly prohibited by the 14th Amendment, because it is prohibiting certain behaviors based on assumptions of what those behaviors should be because of what genitalia you appear to have, or what genitalia you do have. It's a very it's a very explicit, uh, it is a very explicit situation in which we are most it is sexual based discrimination. It is punishing behaviors that would not be punished if the person exhibiting them had a different set of genitalia. So it is a very, very clear sexual discrimination, at least in my view. And so discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation is covered under this exception, covered under this umbrella. So that's there. And in this case, these two were in conflict. This case went before the Civil Rights Commission, and the Civil Rights Commission said that they must make that cake. And then that was appealed, and it's gone to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court has not ruled. What they did is what like people like to refer to in the circles in the legal circles I read in the blog circuit. They like to refer to it as punting. That is to say, they did not really rule on the case itself. Supreme Court really doesn't like making rulings. Because if it makes a ruling, it becomes law, effectively. They don't like doing that. They want to make sure that they want to try to narrowly tailor their decisions and hit specific points of law that are problematic. And so on this one, they didn't rule on whether or not the civil rights of the couple were violated. They instead ruled that the way the Civil Rights Commission ruled showed prejudice against the First Amendment rights of the cake shop owner. Specifically, the ruling was very dismissive and even attacking the sincerely held religious beliefs of the cake shop. And that's a problem. Whatever you think of the cake shop's decision, he has a right to hold those beliefs. He wasn't harming anyone in those beliefs, but he was still attacked for having them. And not attacked by potential customers, by the internet. No, he was attacked by the government for his religious beliefs. And then held then was forced by the government, told by the government that he was forced to perform certain expressions of artistic merit. He needed to exercise. It was costing him his freedom of expression. The court didn't go into that, but I'm going to need to talk about that later. But in the end, the problem was is that they punished him, probably fined him because of his religious beliefs, explicitly because they didn't like his religious beliefs, not because he infringed upon the civil rights of someone else. It's more of a procedural question, but the Supreme Court rules on procedural questions a lot. So it's not too surprising from someone who's kind of been following Supreme Court decisions lately. I yeah, they've had some very interesting ones. There's one case that I think got thrown back to the CAFC, CFAC. I can't remember what it is. I've never understood the acronym behind it. It's the Patent Appeals Board. And the Patent Appeals Board, they got sent to the Patent Appeals Board like 3 times. Like, you know, hey, it appears you did not consider our decisions in this case. Why don't you please reconsider? Okay, no, really, we just made a ruling here. Maybe that'll give you some better, give you some better guidance. Okay, really, we just made, so between the last time and this time, we've made another decision. Here's this one. Now, please apply the standard in this ruling, and maybe you'll come to the right conclusion. That's basically what they were saying. They didn't want to, but the Supreme Court has actually had to spend a bit of time in the last 5 years smacking down the Patent Appeals Board for just making a mockery of any restrictions placed in the law. So, back to this case. So, the Supreme Court is punted and basically asked the Civil Rights Commission to reevaluate and to come up with a solid legal footing. And that, in the end, they could come back with another statement that the Cakeshop needs to have, the Cakeshop needs to make that cake, or needs to make cakes for homosexual weddings, and that might be what happens. I think it'd be the wrong decision, and a lot of you here, allies that normally would support me, liberal. I've expressed myself as a liberal, so I'm going to get a lot of weird things, a lot of probably hate on this point. But please listen to me as I make a clear, as I try to make a. I'm not making a broad statement. I'm trying to make a nuanced statement, and that's at the core of my belief in where the government needs to stand as far as anything goes when it comes to you or I. It is most important that we deal with the government. When we deal with the government only gets involved when my right to self-determine my own existence interacts with yours. And in this way, I feel what people are asking for in this case is too much. You're pushing things too far. You're beginning to require thought and action and First Amendment infringing activity upon the Cakeshop in an effort to make sure that you are not discriminated against for your sexual orientation. And as much as we need to kind of balance this, I'm going to pull away from the religious argument for a moment. And there's a reason I couch it the way I do. The important thing is the freedom of expression. And I'm saying this because there are a lot of people who dislike the idea that religion, can somehow allow for any level of discrimination. And I'm very supportive of the arguments that, we don't want a no blacks policy at a cake shop. I get that. Um, but it's not a no blacks policy, and I'm going to try to distinguish the issue. In the end, I think the cake shop should just do it. But there's another element that really needs to be talked about, and I think is hard to get away from. So, this case involves a. We're going to pull out for a second. We're going to move to something else. And there are some people that are already going to tell me when I'm finished with my thing, oh, yeah, we totally need to force them to do that too. Because I've been hearing it. But get with me, because I'm going to I'm going to try to take this out a bit further. I'm trying to take the logic of the cake shop out a bit further to try to get to a situation where most people would say, yeah, we probably, this doesn't apply in this situation, and then try to bring it back and then try to highlight, it's a logical technique. We try to take things out to almost an absurdist angle. You try to take this, right now we're sitting in the gray area. It's a wedding cake. We're kind of sitting in a place where it's like, why don't you just do it? So I need to take this out to something that is a lot more obvious, that you need to defer to the artist. Because wedding cakes are an art. And I'll talk to you about why that is true in a moment. So, in this situation, what I've thought of is a boudoir photographer. He will, he will take a couple and he will position them and he will pose them and he will direct them. He sets up the scene, he frames the scene, he lights the scene. This is his art. The subjects are the couple. The couple is also the client. But no one would say he's selling. He is creating, in this case, this photography, this scene, this set. This is a act of expression. It is an intimate act that requires everyone involved be a part of it. He is there, part of the intimacy of this photo shoot. In fact, I'm going to adjust this just slightly. It's just one of them. A boudoir photographer normally will probably quite often will photograph men and women. But we're largely not gonna be upset if a boudoir photographer is only photographing one subject. Why? Because a boudoir photographer is not going to produce his best work for a subject with which he feels nothing. If a boudoir photographer does not want anything, if a boudoir photographer does not feel, have the right feel with any subject, he's not going to produce good work. He'll produce serviceable work, because he has the skills and the lighting, and he knows the positions and the angles. But the best work is going to come from someone whom he is able to connect with. They are able to connect with. I'm sorry, I've been using gendered language. My apologies. Um, and so, and then the same applies if the to a couple. And even though what is not attracting him is the display of affection, um, it's still something that is turning him off and pulling him out and making it harder for him to produce good work. And the problem is it's not just work. This is art. It is his art. And he has a First Amendment right for the government not to step in and say, look, you created art for this person over here, therefore you have to create art for this person over here, and you can have no, and um, because you say it's about your desire to complete the commission, whereas you have no problem denying this person because because you're busy that weekend. The government is starting to decide what work he's doing, and that is expressly the height of what we don't want to do. Um, uh, Now, and there are plenty of good wedding examples. We've got a great example. Someone I know, her mother makes wedding dresses, and um, even and she asked someone was trying to commission a wedding dress for a male, and her mother was and her mother's first response was, I don't do work for men. I don't make dresses for men. And we actually legally support that. There's a lot of question about our ability to legally support that, but in general, we legally support that because of the fact that she's an artist. Um, Now, granted, that was her way of getting around the fact that she found homosexuals to be an abomination. But that's how she handled that. Is she would say, I don't, I that's how she handled that, is by saying, the work I do, I do for women. The art I create, I'm creating for women. I am not going to have a piece commissioned for a man. Um, and the fact that that distinction was in general considered more acceptable than, I'm not going to do a wedding dress for a homosexual wedding. It tells me a lot about the way we tolerate what we're tolerating in the world, and it's frustrating. In the end, what I'm saying, I continue to believe. Um, we need to bring this back to the cake. So you don't buy a wedding cake from a specific person, like to the point where the fact that that person didn't sell you the wedding cake, you are going to sue over. That is not something that is born of, I just want a wedding cake. You want that person to make you a wedding cake. And why? It's not the cake. You can get that cake at any shop in the world. You can get the cake, the actual, physical, spongy cake. You can get that at any shop. No, no. What the person wanted was not a cake. They wanted a wedding cake. And they wanted a wedding cake made from that specific shop because there is something about the art, the specific expressions found in the wedding cakes produced by that shop. That is what is important in a wedding cake. That is why you're going to go to a specific shop for that wedding cake. Otherwise, you could buy some tiered things and just buy some cakes of the right sizes and, just have them slopped in some basic white frosting. And, maybe wink, wink, nudge, nudge, right? No. What you want is you want the art that artist is, that cake, that chef is creating. It is their art that is important. And that is where the cake shop made the best argument. And I've heard a lot of people laugh at this argument, but I think it is the best argument. It is the argument that actually resolves, I think, the case in their favor, which is that they've got cakes in their shop. They'll buy them off the rack. They will be happy to even commission, cakes for other events, birthdays, um, you know, for other things, holidays, birthdays, you name it. There's a reason for a cake. They'll make it. What they won't do is a wedding cake. That is so. And that distinction is kind of what makes it for them. Because at that point, they're making a distinction not about the cake, not about their willingness to serve these people their willingness to serve these people as a retail establishment. No, they're making a distinction about what they're willing to do as artists, about their First Amendment right of expression in choosing what art they are allowed to make. And in that way, it is absolutely their solemn right to deny your ability to get a cake, a wedding cake, for any reason. And I think it was a very clear and distinct point. I don't know, maybe there wasn't another cake shop in town. I don't know what it was about that cake shop that was so important to the couple. But frankly, commerce. Get your cake out elsewhere. You can't force anyone to make art. You can't force someone to photograph you. You can't force someone to make a painting of you. You can't force someone to compose a song for your wedding. You can't force someone to decorate a cake for you either. Well, now that I failed at the internet by trying to make a incredibly nuanced argument, thank you all, and I will see you next time. Keep talking.